Good morning, our viewers. A very good morning and welcome back to The Other Perspective, a space where we interrogate the thing behind the thing that is the thing. If you haven't subscribed to ACFIN's YouTube channel yet, hit the subscribe button down below. And if you have, hit the bell so you will know every time we upload a new video. Let's thank you for tuning in and let's get straight to today's discussion. Today we are looking at the budget framework paper 2022-2023 post-COVID recovery. The budget framework paper for the financial year 2022-2023 was tabled in Parliament last week. According to this framework paper, the national budget will increase from 45 trillion Ugandan shillings to 47.2 trillion Ugandan shillings. The increase is attributed to a number of factors, including financing the parish development model and the Uganda National Oil Company. There are also proposals to increase the national wage bill from 5.5 Ugandan trillion shillings to 7.4 Ugandan trillion shillings. The biggest proportion of the budget is going into human capital development, which is covering health and education, and that is at 6.9 trillion Ugandan shillings, followed by governance and security, which accommodates defense, security, the state house, and other classified votes at 6.4 trillion shillings. And joining me to discuss this topic today are panelists who are no strangers to the show. And I'm beginning with the only lady that we have, Priska Wanyenya. Priska is a parliamentary journalist, and it's nice to see you again, Priska. Priska, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. I'd forgotten to unmute myself. Sorry about that. Good morning to our listeners and viewers and my fellow panelists. That I'm looking forward to listening and getting new ideas from them.
Thank you, Priska. And next we have Gerard Koraneza. Gerard is a youth in democracy activist, and he's no stranger to the show as well. Gerard, you're most welcome to the show.
Thank you, Riza. Good morning, my fellow panelists. It's a pleasure to be here again.
And then lastly, we have Eddie Kainda. Eddie is a seasoned economist and educationist as well. Eddie, it's nice to have you on here once again.
Lisa, thank you so much for inviting me to this conversation, and I'm looking forward to making a positive contribution and listening to the other panelists that are in here today. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Eddie. So let's get right into the questions, and this is going to all of you, but I'll begin with Priska. Priska, do you think that this framework paper presupposes that the Uganda national budget for 2022 and 2023 will be pro-poor or pro-elite?
Thanks so much, Lisa. And I would like to make a correction from the very start, because the document that was tabled last week was the appropriation bill, because the budget framework paper was passed in February. So it's just they tabled the appropriation bill, which the layman calls the budget, then the tax measures. So it's just a correction that you need to make. Because the budget framework paper is the one that informs what is in the budget. So when the budget was tabled last week, it was tabled by the appropriation bill was tabled by the State Minister for Planning, that is Amos Lugolowe, and we at Parliament has not yet started to interact with it, because they are still dealing with the mourning and the burial of the former speaker. But and because what I know is they have a deadline up to the end of this month, so it's going to be a rigorous process the coming 2-3 weeks that are coming up, because they're going to scrutinize, and Parliament has said they're not going to give the committees any additional time to process but usually when the budget is, so we haven't yet scrutinized and seen what contents are there. But one thing that came up from the opposition side, because they had the chance to look at the different ministerial policy statements and respond, give alternative reactions to as it's provided for in the rules. What stood out is in the sector of human capital, because right now it's the program based. So human capital, they lump it together with health and education. So the sector of health, particularly, the shadow minister for health raised a procedure, as well as the leader of opposition. He complained about the copy and paste, because what we know is the Ministry of Health has recycled the budget for the coming financial year. What only changed was, according to the opposition, was the executive summary, then the forward, I think something, but everything now it's copy and paste. What was in the budget for this current financial year in health is what was tabled. So there is that mix up, and the government had talked of trying to harmonize the issue, but the leader of opposition warned them all, because it said that this shows the preparedness of the health sector on how it's going to handle post-COVID. And the mere fact that the topical discussion today is hinged on post-COVID, and we know that this is a health pandemic, and when you realize that the Ministry of Health that has been mandated to treat and handle the COVID, and it's the same one that has brought a problematic, a recycled budget, I think that spells a lot of doom regarding the planning side of the ministry, because you tend to think that even before the minister brings that budget, even when the document is tabled on your table, you are supposed to peruse through and see what are the changes. But that is something that they didn't, an oversight they didn't make. But well, someone may think probably it's a minor issue, but it gives very negative indicators on the ministry and how we are handling the pandemic. So if it means that the ministry is going to handle the pandemic the same way which is going to the way it's handling the pandemic right now is the same way. And we have all this confusion around them stopping the testing at the borders. Then we have the confusion of them sending off, firing the temporary staff that they had hired, and yet some of them have not been paid for about 5 months. And because if you look at the global trends right now, it looks like we are entering another wave of the COVID pandemic, because I think on Tuesday, on Monday, China recorded about over 16,000 cases, a number of cases that they have never recorded since the pandemic broke out. And it's like their biggest city, Shanghai, is under lockdown. So when you get all these global trends vis-a-vis what is happening in the country, I do not see how the ministry is prepared in case another lockdown comes up, because the staff that have been standing in the gap because of the shortage have been laid off. Now the budget that you're trying to come up with, how we are going to recover, is also problematic. But what I know is when you base on the knowledge from the budget framework paper that was passed, nothing much was dedicated towards the post-COVID recovery. Because when you look at the indicators, you also talked about security and actually the loan repayment is getting the biggest share, about 15 trillion is set aside for that. Then you look at security, that shows where the focus is going to be. Security has little or nothing to do with the post-COVID pandemic. So when you ask me whether the budget is pro-poor or pro-informed, the indicators show it's otherwise about that.
Thank you so much, Priska, for that, and thank you for the correction that it was an appropriation bill, not the budget framework. Thank you for that. And Eddie, Priska mentioned something interesting. She said the budget we have is more so of a replication of the budget from the previous year. What does this mean for us Ugandans, especially given the fact that these people that created the budget did not look at the new dynamics that have changed in this year? What does this? Should we be worried?
Thank you, Eliza, for that. The straight answer for that is that the persons developing the budget are lazy. And why am I saying lazy? In a functional democracy and in a governance and administration framework, we are supposed to have a team that is responsible for budget development. Now, there could be options of developing budgets on the side of government. Probably they could opt to use a zero-based approach, where in the context of the COVID pandemic, we are restarting everything, including the economy. So we needed to look at the dynamics through which different things would be financed, what it means in terms of activities, what it means in terms of financing, what it means in terms of inputs that we need to have in the budget, and restart something approach. But what they opted to use was an incremental approach, where they look at the budget of the previous year and lump a few monies here and there, use a percentage model to say if this costs around this much, we can now increase it by this much, and they gave us a new budget framework. And in that bill that was tabled to Parliament. For me, that shows the very lack of seriousness in terms of handling a very key issue like a budget. And you know, a budget is a financial statement that tells us how we are going to be running the economy over the next 1 year. And they needed to give it a little bit more of seriousness than what we saw. And this is typical of what has been happening, that they have not taken time they have not put their noses on the grinding stone to ensure that they pick out the details and the nitty-gritties of what it means to budget, but recycle what has been previously done. For me, I look at this as recycling incompetence within that framework. But my discussion, I don't want to start on a negative note. We want to know that whereas this budget is looking at, they have flagged human capital development as the anchor for the coming budget. And for me, I don't see this coming out, given the fact that post-COVID-19, when the economy is badly shattered and beaten, we do not see any specific interventions that are geared towards recovering the economy. And if I may be specific, taking the budget to the local person, they have prioritized things like security, things like financing, administration, and the governance framework, without necessarily giving it the fair due respect it would have needed in terms of raising the key human development indices, including ability of the communities to access, to improve their levels of income, but also ability of the communities and the young people to access education and skills that are critical in the post-COVID environment, but also more specifically, the failed health care system that is letting a lot of people down. And I'm happy that this was raised yesterday by a few members of Parliament. For me, these are the key issues they would have focused on if they wanted to make a pro-people budget that we need to have as Ugandans. Back to you, Aliza.
Thank you for that submission, Eddie. And Gerard, I'll come to you with the same question. Do you, so far from both Priska and Eddie, they indicate that this is a pro-elite budget. What do you think? Do you think the budget is pro-poor or pro-elite?
Thank you, Lisa, for that very good question. Of course, as the country is recovering from the effect of COVID-19, when I look at the appropriation bill, as Priska has rightly put it.
Jared, you have
Yeah.
a background echoes. Kindly work on that.
So sectors, there are sectors specifically like tourism. These are sectors which have been hit hard, and I'm very excited to see like Parliament increasing the bill from 178 billion to 181 billion. Everyone knows that they crossed the country, the tourism sector, the hotels, the tourism, they weren't coming in the country. So reviving the tourism sector, I see that kind of attempt to increase the budget as really a booster, or boosting that very sector. And I'm kind of disappointed in their childhood. The government has been singing of the parish development model, and even up to now, instead of taking it as a priority, but over 10,595 parishes that we have in the country, they have allocated 43.8 million to these very parishes. If you think that you want really people to recover from the COVID effects, this money is very little. A parish in this very country, an average parish has like almost 20 to 15 villages. So when you give 43.8 million to these parishes, really that money is very little. Of course, the committee on the budget recommended that they would have really increased this money at least to 100 million. So I see it as a disappointment, because you can't say that you're taking the government to the people, yet you're giving it little money. So I'm disappointed by our current wage bill. Now the current wage bill has increased from 5.5 trillion to 7.4 trillion. What does that one show? Me, I see it as these are the elites who wants to satisfy their needs, because not everyone is employed by the public sector. Why would you really prioritize giving elites, spending on salary, on their salary enhancement? So I would see a lot of money going into agro industrialization. You've been singing that you want to transform the people from subsistence agriculture to commercial agriculture, but now you're allocating only 1.7 trillion for agro industrialization. Why can't you cut the budget for security? Every time we are giving money, okay, security is one of also a sensitive area, of course, where you can't really cut the budget. But really, if you need to develop the people, you need to invest a lot in agro industrialization. You need, if you're saying that you want to transform Uganda into a middle income status, then you must actualize by not speaking on the paper. Back to you, Lisa. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Jared, for that submission. Thank you for that. And my next question goes to you, Priska. Earlier on, you stated that the budget is now following a program-based method, and this remains very confusing to the ordinary Uganda. We have seen them lump under the, is it human, sorry if I'm not getting my facts straight, but we are seeing them lumping education, health under one whole block. And we are told that the devil is always in the details, and this budget is devoid of details. Do you think this method of budgeting is a tool being used to, what do you think, Priska?
Actually, the program-based budgeting has kind of created confusion, because even when you look at the the formality of Parliament, how they conduct their business. Because when these ministerial policy statements, what you call the layman calls the budget, when each ministry or agency brings its ministerial policy statement, they are considered there by per sector. The Committee of Education, something like that. So there are calls from government to Parliament to also change their committees into program based. So like instead of having two committees of education and having a committee of health, you're going to have one committee that is the Human Development Committee. But of course, the MPs are adamant towards transitioning to that train, because it will mean that Parliament is going to have less committees, because program based is you're lumping up different. So, and if the Parliament has less committees, that means we are going to have less number of chairpersons and vice chairpersons. Then it will also affect their pay. So that is the whole politics about it. And even the agencies themselves, the ministries, and commissions and everything, they are also failing to transition, because to transition to program-based budgeting, they are still stuck in their back in the old fashion of Ministry of Education, Ministry of something like that. So it's going to take a while, and each time this debate when Ministry of Finance tries to ask Parliament to transition to the program-based budgeting, especially in their committees, Parliament is always hesitant. It's the debate that they are shy away from talking, but it isn't any difference. Only that a kind of specialization that the government is trying to make and to follow as per their proposals they made in the national what development plan 3, I think, that is that 3 or 4 that we are currently operating. So it's not something that is strange that should confuse the public. They are just trying to, you see, like human capital, you're investing in the human capital. That means health, education. So that is basically the thing. It's just a new terminology. And even us as journalists, it has also taken us, because we keep on asking ourselves, where does this from? Now, now especially the field of security confuses me. Sometimes you find that the IGG is under security, and you're like, security, what is the IGG doing there? So it's just the lumping that is. Now, for instance, I think there is also a program on a program, or is it on mindset change, something like that. So, and mindset changes, and that's dealing with ICT Ministry of National Guidance. So and yet there is also an ICT. So it's just the confusion that was brought, but it's not. But when you say that the devil is in the details, that's why when the budget is brought, it's just the appropriation bill is brought, but it's the first documents that come are the ministerial policy statements. So they are the ones that detail so Ministry of Health brings this budget, this is what we want to spend on. So it's during the committee consideration that they try to break down. But of course, as you said, they are always figures that they lump in their budgets, that and sometimes if the MPs are not alert, those figures are just approved without even a breakdown of what. For instance, now there was a proposal on the 89 billion that was in the budget, national budget framework paper of the Congo War, that to finance, but there was no breakdown on how each money is going to be spent. So that is when the committees come in and they demand for an accountability on each penny that is going to be spent. But it always doesn't come to that. But at least it tries to inform on how the money is going to be spent.
So, Chris, you brought up something about the MPs trying to keep away from this model because they benefit from the committees and being chairpersons. Can you tell us more about this? Because I thought, now that you've clarified how the program-based budgeting works, why would the MPs please explain? Bring more.
So,
Give us more.
so like for instance, we currently have a committee on education, and we also have a committee on health, because I'm now looking at human capital development. It has two components. That program-based budgeting, human capital has two components. It has education and health. So when the budgets are brought, all the referral hospitals also come and appear, Mulago, Kabale, and everything. So they also come and defend their budgets. But with and usually the selection of the MPs to the different committees, there is a component of your specialty and your background of education. So for instance, you can say Seumbi is a teacher, he's usually on education. You can say Lulume from Buyukwe is a doctor, so he's also on health. So with the program-based budgeting, it means both Minister of Education and Minister, if Parliament was to go by that, to put their committees in that place, Parliament will now have one single committee of human capital development. So that means that Mulago will appear in front of teachers, the MPs who trained as teachers, to try to defend. And I think that is why there is friction about that, because they tend to think the current procedure works in their favor because they're kind of specialized in that way. If you lump them together, they will lack that element of specialization. And also when you look at the number of MPs on a committee, I think right now there is an average of about 35, between 35 to 40 MPs of around that in a committee. So that will mean that if you brought one committee of human capital development, that human capital will have about 80 MPs. So you're going to have a meeting whereby 80 MPs have to ask questions to the agencies that are coming. So that is, I think that is the friction that is happening. It's something that as Eddie had remarked about the seriousness about the handling of the budget, is something I think the government fell short of consultations when they are making the national development plan. Because if they had consulted and seen how Parliament handles its business, it would be, they would have harmonized that issue. And so when you're looking at, I don't know if any of you has been in those committees. So when you look at 80 MPs, they might not all attend at the same time, but 80 MPs all struggling to ask their questions. So many of them will be put off and not attend. And if I think every attendance is about 50K, so it will also impact on their earning. That is it. So there is the component of money, and although I don't know whether it features so much as it's top priority, but as someone who has covered Parliament, the program-based budgeting, if Parliament was to follow it in terms of committees, switching their committees to that, it will be kind of hard for them, because at least the current module allows them the element of specialization. Now that means if you have the bill on national sports and sciences will come, and you'll be asking doctors will be wanting to comment about sports, and yet the Committee of Education has people who are sports. So it's just the confusion that is there. But I don't know whether the switch will come into force, but I don't see it, because it works. If you go to program-based budgeting, it will mean the number of committees are reduced. But there is also an element of rewarding some MPs after elections with some committee posts. So that is the confusion. I don't know how they are going to solve it. Basically, that is the whole thing.
Thank you, Priska. And Eddie, I don't know if you're still on. Eddie, as an economist, would you advocate for this program-based budgeting? Is it?
Lisa, thank you so much. In the development arena world over, we have gone past using a project approach, especially in terms of government programming, because projects are very short term, and the type of programming government has is long term, and we're interested in looking at long-term effects on the population and the citizenry than the short-term benefits. I think it's now time for the MPs to switch towards the kind of programming they have had, towards embracing the program approach towards the implementation of government projects. But for me, that is not the issue. The issue is, if we have a budget like we're going to have in the next 2 months, I think, around July. What is this structure of budget that we do have that should transit into programming and having long-term impact and transforming lives? One, Uganda is operating a deficit budget. And when you look at the budget variance, it's negative, meaning that Uganda as an economy, we cannot finance our own budget. When we say we have a 47 trillion shilling budget, URA's capacity is only 16 to 17 trillion shillings annually, meaning that the biggest percentage of the budget is going to be financed either through debt or through donations to project and budget support. You should have known that by around March, we had surpassed our borrowing minimum from 50 to around 53%, whereas the ministry is mentioning that they are technically opting to go past the ceiling, and they are aware and they're controlling it. For me, I do not think it is healthy for this economy that we surpass our the recommended ceiling according to the international financial institutions. This means that within the context of program-based budgeting, much as we may have the work plans, the budgets, and all resources that are available, we may fail to finance it because of the nature of debt. We only have about 27 trillion available for the main government business in terms of central and local governance planning, but also state enterprises, and the rest of the money, including is gonna be paid for is gonna be used to pay government debt and refinancing, but also administration and governance issues. Now you see that the remaining money to assist programming is very little. And when you see, as I finish up with this, you shall see that world over, if you're following global trends, Sri Lanka is in protests because of debt. If you watch international news networks, in Colombo, there are protests all over. We have in Venezuela, there's in Lima, there are protests out there. When you look at most of the countries in Europe, the cost of business is high, the cost of living is high, majorly because of it seems like the world is receding into a very huge crisis because of this. And for me, Uganda as an economy needed to borrow a leaf from such kind of international developments, so that we could be able to scale on how we budget and how we implement activities using the program approach. Back to you, Lisa.
Thank you, Eddie, for that. And we're going to start from where you left it right after the break.
Honorable, man, we are so glad. Thank you so much.
Are you okay?
We are really fine. Actually, you've served us.
Thank you for what
I've been hearing.
Thank you so much. You've really done a great job.
Please give me more chisanja, okay?
You've just served us.
Oh, I get
fine.
A long time.
Yes, it should be long time. Honorable. I guessed right. Oh, yes, Honorable. These trust funds?
Yes, I need a loan of 50 million shillings. Just help me find a reasonable money lender.
10 million shillings? Right now?
Yes.
That's crazy.
No, it is just strategic.
How strategic is that? Honorable, how's that strategic?
I'm responding to people's needs and gaining political capital.
Sorry. Why don't you let the government do their job? Eh? What will you do about the health sector? How about education? How about water? Eh? This is not sustainable, my friend. This cannot be sustainable.
You expect our parliament to respond to people's problems?
Then fix it. Then fix the parliament. Do your job.
I'm sorry to disappoint.
Indeed, I am disappointed.
My political survival comes first. This is an opportunity for me to be seen working.
This is the quality of most of our MPs. Oh God, help our country.
Fellow citizens, now that election season is over, it's time for elected leaders to perform their statutory roles, such as policy making, oversight, and accountability.
Contribute today at www.politicalfinanceafrica.org/donate.
Welcome back from that short break, and I hope all our panelists are back on set. So before we broke off, Eddie had gone into the issues of debt, and Eddie, I want to keep you where we were at. If the wage bill is at 7.4 trillion Ugandan shillings, and the mandatory debt servicing is at 16 trillion, this comes to a total of about 23 trillion. And yet the UR tax projection is 25 trillion, which means we would only be left with 2 trillion. Where's the rest of the money going to come from, Eddie? Eddie, you seem to be muted.
I was saying that, like I mentioned, that the capacity of our national tax collector to collect money for our budget is about 16 to 17 trillion shillings, meaning that the rest of the money is either going to be picked from debt and borrowing, but also donations and budget support. Now, the tax burden to Uganda is already too high, and you shall realize that when you look at Uganda statistics, only about 15% of the businesses and people in the formal sector pay taxes that finance over 80% of government business and other related costs of running government. That spells disaster for a country like Uganda. And for me, again, when you look at the appropriation bill that was passed, it tries to direct you to the perspective of using tax, an already taxed economy, overtaxed economy, as a means of financing government business. You shall know that there are now tabled amendment bills for excise duty, for value-added tax, for URA Amendment Act 2022 is being tabled, and other tax procedures, policies, rules are being changed. You're already kind of trying to see that government is focusing towards increasing the amount of tax Ugandans are paying already, without increasing the tax base to finance most of the activities. And for me, this leaves us in a very, very
difficult situation post-COVID-19. When businesses are moving down and you do not have a sustainable tax base, you really have to struggle to make sure that the economy stands. Already, this could be one of the reasons as to why we are having inflation. Currently, prices are high, and for me, what is pushing prices higher is one, we have very limited aggregate supply, but also the aggregate demand is low. And this automatically pushes the prices up in a circumstances where you find that the, the, the financial wherewithal of government, but also individuals and businesses to invest in a wider tax space is limited. Automatically prices go high. But of course, but also prices are being shot up by what we call cost push. Cost push is where you establish that most of the manufacturers and industrialists are importing cost of materials at a very, very high price. And there is no reason as to why they have to charge lower past what they are using in terms of production. And this explains why, for example, soap and cooking oil is high, because the materials they're using to manufacture these products is important. Now, when you have such kind of a scenario where you are even going to tax more the materials that are already higher, then you're leaving your economy and exposing it to the mercy of God. And for me, I think the Minister of Finance needed to treat this as an emergency, ensure that we can have alternative means of financing. Either they do a budget cut or they ask for a debt relief and or a an amortization of the loan schedules, so that we can have more money available for us as an economy to finance some of the development activities that are aimed at improving the lives of the people in terms of income, in terms of education, in terms of health, among others. Otherwise, by the look of things, I'm not sure whether we are heading into a very positive direction. And Ugandans should be blessed for some of the worst scenarios that we might be able to experience. So far, fuel has gone up to about 5,400. You realize that Kenyans, where we would run to be rescued, Kenyans in Busia and in the western side are running into Busia to pick fuel, whereas Tanzanians, whereas Ugandans in the areas of Mutukula and Rakai are running to Tanzania to also pick fuel. So, and of course, this is increasing the cost of doing business. And if the cost of doing business is high, it means that even the tax base is going to be lower, and Uganda will have to revise the way we are doing this, such that we can be able to refinance our budget. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you, Eddie. Thank you, Eddie, for that. So, Jared, I'm coming to you. Does this budget framework address the most pressing needs of today, which is youth unemployment in Uganda? Do you think this budget framework addresses this?
Thank you, Lisa. As I said, the government had attempted to address the youth of unemployment by taking actually the government to the people, that is at local, at the parish level. But I got disappointed with the allocation which they are giving to parishes. I believe youth at local level, they need they need capital. They need to engage in entrepreneurial, entrepreneurial work so that they can get, a living. They need to go away from the city suburbs and go back to the villages so that they can till the small land which they do have. But with a budget where you're allocating like a parish development model, which you're always thinking that you're you're going to transform the people from peasantry to commercial to modern agriculture to transforming the lives of the people. How will really the 43 million that they have allocated to a parish that has over 15 to 20 villages, and we have the youth who are there, they are unemployed, they are moving around, they are engaged in drug abusing drugs, they are drinking alcohol, they are doing all that kind of nonsense. So I do not see really budget attempting to address the challenge of unemployment that we are having. At least if they would have really allocated, like how they said they had promised to allocate 100 million to every parish. I would say that probably they can plan around and see the youth engage in something which is very productive. I want to hint on the program-based budgeting, which ED kind of has been actually speaking of. In my own opinion, you see, the government now they are using the program-based budgeting as the way of stealing indirectly public funds, because you see, when you ramp like education and health, and then you just say that you need this, you don't even do the breakdown of the figures. This is what I'm going to spend on this, is what I'm going to spend on this. For purposes of accountability, how will you be able to account to the parliament, to the committees? You will just simply bring these kinds of figures. So I have a problem with the program-based budgeting. So through program-based budgeting, instead of allocating more money, like for instance in the agro-industrialization, you know, they are always moving around with the approach of industrializing the country, building up industries, you know, so that people can get jobs. But now you're allocating agro-industrialization, you're giving it 1.7 trillion. And you're giving a wage bill 7.4 trillion. So what is that? You see, their own interests, their elite, it's the whole budget is pro elite by taking this chunk money in like financing. Like when I see a national wage bill getting like this chunk of money, which would have gone into agro-industrialization, into a parish development model where the people, where we shall see the impacts, where people will engage in productive work, engaging in commercial agriculture. Uganda is a backbone. Uganda's backbone is agriculture. So I'm very pessimistic. I don't really think that the current budget will address the unemployment that is a burden to our country. I submit, Lisa.
Thank you, Jared, for sharing your thoughts on that. I see a comment coming in from Richard Bugembe. Richard, thank you for tuning in. If you could kindly press the yes, he says our budgeting failure stems from an over-centralized economic planning model and a failed decentralization. Local governments, if they were really viable public administration units, should have been the strategic planning levels responsive to grassroots issues. In fact, local governments that cannot finance their plans do not deserve to exist. Very interesting thoughts from Richard. And Priska, if you can see that comment, what do you have to say about that, about our planning?
Oh, of course, Richard is right about, because he hints about the fact calling for the local governments that are not in position to finance their own budgets not to exist in the first place. And it goes back to the issue that we've been talking about, the creation of new administrative units throughout the country. And for instance, we know that the operationalization of the new cities haven't even taken off because there isn't funding, and they are still grappling with the old municipalities on what to do next. So I think Richard is right about the issue he has raised. But I'm going back to the issue that Gerard has. He talked about lumping education, and I think he's lumping education and health in the same time, and they are throwing figures at us. These figures are usually broken down because when ministerial policy statements are tabled, every agency, because they when they tell you health, it deals with everything to do with health. Mulago will come to Parliament and say, this is the money we want, this is why we want it. Every referral hospital, it's the same thing with education. Those universities will also come and say, the Minister of Education tabled this budget on our behalf, but this is why we need this money. So the figure is always broken down, and you tend to get a picture of what the agencies want. And also regarding Eddie, I think he hinted something about the taxes. What I know is this coming financial year, there are no new taxes that are going to be introduced. And this was said way back, even starting from 2021, that they are not going to introduce new taxes. And I looked through all the tax measures, and it's indeed true that they're just streamlining the tax administration. I think one of the things that stood out is they are trying to, government is proposing an income tax waiver exemption for about 5 years for Mulago, no, for Bujagali and private hospitals. But private hospitals, I think there is a threshold of the number of the income you'd have invested in. So the income tax and they say they project that if the tax waiver is given, we are going to lose about 48 billion shillings in each financial year. And when I calculated, that brings about 250 billion for the 5 years, because they are trying to vary from, because they want the tax waiver for Bujagali was supposed to end this financial year, so they are extending it from 2022 to 2027. So those are the 5 years. But when you look critically at the new tax measures, they're not going to introduce any new one. They are just redefining some of the things that were ambiguous, and they are also trying to take, URA is trying to take a group on what? Take a group on the electronic receipting. You know that method where the manufacturers are supposed to introduce some stamps on their manufactured goods. I think the URA is still facing some resistance. So there are proposals for the manufacturers who refuse to adhere to that to be jailed for about 10 years and something like, or forgery of electronic receipts and something like that. And one of the taxes that I had hoped they were going to look at in this financial year is the 5% levy on each kilogram of refined gold and 10% on each kilogram of unrefined gold. You know, we have a refinery here, so the government was trying to encourage the gold exporters to use our refinery instead of taking it there. But ever since this tax came into effect, it came into effect last year in July, the gold exporters have protested it because they are saying the money is too high. And when you look at the performance, the economic performance reports from the Ministry of Finance, it shows that Uganda has not exported a single kilogram of gold ever since this tax came into place. And those are what the figures. And even when you go back to you try to cross-check with the Bank of Uganda, that is the same. So those are over 200 billion shillings that we've been losing in taxes every financial because of the protest by the gold exporters. Apparently, the government thinks that they have not exported a single kilogram of gold. And a kilogram of gold is about over 200 million shillings when you convert it, the market up around that. So you imagine the 10% levy on it, that's about 20 million for each kilo. And each kilo of unrefined and 5 million on refined. So we are losing a lot of money through the gold export. It's a tax that I had hoped that government would address, because for this whole year they've been saying in their economic reports, they've been saying we are in talks with the gold exporters to address it. Actually, when the tax measures came out, it was one of the first things that I looked at, and I was disappointed that it didn't come. So generally, this financial aid has not been, they are not introducing it, as we are continuing with the ones. And the other thing is you talked about is it the 25 trillion?
As you wrap up, Chris, our time
Yes,
is-
I'm wrapping up. Yes, the 25 trillion that URA is supposed to collect this coming financial year. There's been even the former Commissioner General of URA talked about the over ambitiousness of government when they are setting up these tax collection rates that there have been. So when regarding to the taxes, Uganda should not expect any new taxes in the coming. They are stuck with the others. There are just some variations of VAT or something like that. Okay.
Thank you, Krista. Eddie, just in a second, kindly wrap up.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Wanyanya raises a very critical issue on taxes. Actually, for me, my issue is not about whether they introduce new taxes or not. The issue is they should try to be frugal and use lesser cost in for example, collecting the existing taxes, but also try to widen the tax base. Like I mentioned to you, between 10 and 15% paid taxes for over 80% of the government expenses and budgets. But to give you my last thoughts on this, I think we need government needs to be a little bit more frugal and efficient in terms of using the available resources, but also be mindful about corruption. When the IGG mentions that we have 20 trillion being lost in a financial year, for me that is not acceptable, and it tells you the type of economy that we are running. But generally, I think in the next financial year, government should think of a more expansionary model in terms of improving the economy, lowering, for example, the borrowing rates. People can access money and monetize the economy. But also, in the worst case scenario, we may even want to do a quantitative easing, much as this may cause a lot of inflation or some inflationary tendencies. But I think we need more money in the economy. But also, we need to explore more ways of ensuring that the austerity measures that are being proposed by Bank of Uganda, including using commercial banks and UDB, are put in place to ensure that we widen the fiscal base. And at a community level, I think we need to be more creative. Let us try to reignite the communities to establish that when the model comes in, the PDM model comes in, it finds a fertile ground. Otherwise, if we're going to think that government is just going to push in monies into the economy through the model, and it finds a community that is not ready, we do not think we're going to see any increase in business, much as this will not increase any aggregate demand and supply. So the long-term development Uganda should embrace, especially at community level, is to try to ensure that they engage their households and communities into productive communities at household level, but by ensuring that we have productive units, but also using local resources within the homes. Otherwise, I do not see any changes that we may have from this budget than what we have had already. And COVID-19 effects puts us in a more precarious condition that we have never seen. But I always be positive that better things are about to come. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you, Eddie. Thank you, Eddie, so much. And Jared, just in 1 second, kindly wrap it
You know, our budgets, they are always distorted by the supplementary requests, which we usually see every other month, every other quarter. So I do not want to see such also coming in the next financial year, the supplementary budget. And secondly, Uganda, we have a high marginal propensity to consume than actually what we generate. You see now, right now, we have the narrow tax base. So we collect little and our tax base is not widen. Of course, we can't widen a tax base because the COVID has shattered each and everything. So by adding more tax to the people, that would really be very negative on the side of the citizenry. So we need to be very frugal, cost effective, efficient, and the corruption should not really be part and parcel in our program-based budgeting. I thank you, Lisa.
All right, thank you, Jared, for that. And thank you once again to all the panelists and all our viewers that tuned in. Hope to see you next week with this.